The Cobra Effect: Why Good Intentions Don't Solve Problems. This article was prompted by an exchange I had with Elon Musk on X, in which he pointed out that giving more money to homelessness charities in California does not seem to reduce the number of homeless people. In response, I reminded him about the Cobra Effect and was surprised to discover how many people hadn't heard of it. The Cobra Effect is based on a story which may or may not have taken place during British colonial rule in India. Despite its unconfirmed authenticity, it remains a powerful illustration of how bad incentives can undermine good intentions. In my view, it should be taught as early as possible to anyone who intends to run, manage, or operate any system of almost any complexity. The story goes something like this. In colonial India under British rule, the city of Delhi had a problem with cobras. To control the cobra population, the government offered a bounty for every dead cobra. Huge numbers of dead cobras were handed in, but the cobra problem got worse, not better. Why? Because people realized they could profit from this bounty not by killing cobras in the wild, but by breeding cobras, raising and killing them specifically for reward. This led to small-scale cobra farming operations. When the government became aware of this practice, they discontinued the bounty program. Without the incentive, the cobra breeders released their now worthless snakes into the wild. As a result, the cobra population in Delhi ended up increasing rather than decreasing, exacerbated by the government's own policies. The reason this story resonates is that it reflects something we all know. Intentions don't drive human behavior. Incentives do. A good recent example might be Mexico City's Hoy No Circular program, intended to reduce pollution by banning cars from the road one day a week based on their license plate numbers. This policy led to an increase in car ownership. Why? Because people bought additional cars with different plate numbers to bypass the restriction, thus increasing pollution. You will no doubt be aware that over the last decade there's been a powerful societal push to improve relations between different racial, ethnic and other groups. Yet oddly, tensions between these various groups do not appear to be declining. On the contrary, men and women, for example, are increasingly positioned as enemies by man-hating feminists on the one hand and misogynistic incels and people like Andrew Tate on the other. The same is true of race relations, where our societies have moved in a matter of years from an imperfect color blindness to an obsession with skin color and ethnic background. How has this happened? Well, once the well-intentioned goal of eliminating discrimination became lucrative through the introduction of anti-racism courses, media advocacy, and the diversity industrial complex, the demand for racism began to outstrip supply. In a world in which you could earn tens of thousands of dollars for teaching white people to feel guilty, pursue a profitable career based entirely on media appearances, and raise millions through activism, the incentives became irresistible. As Eric Hoffer famously said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. If you are an anti-racist charity, for example, the gradual elimination of racism, your stated goal, is a direct threat to your existence. This is why you must find more and more evidence of the thing you are attempting to eradicate, which is where concepts like microaggressions come from. In the absence of clear evidence of racism, new forms of racism must be found. That's why it is wise to pay very little attention to the intentions people declare when attempting to persuade others to their cause, and a great deal of attention to how carefully they've considered the incentive structure, as well as the second-order consequences of their actions. That's the consequences of the consequences. This brings us back to homelessness in California. Not only are attempts to deal with it failing, but the problem itself is also the result of well-intentioned policies. The deinstitutionalization movement, whose goal was to free people of the tyranny of mental asylums in America, sought to capitalize on the invention of new medications like Thorazine, which made it feasible for mentally ill people to live in the community. In doing so, advocates pushed for a transition away from mental institutions whose horrors are well documented. Unfortunately, they failed to take into account that when you release people with significant emotional, psychological, and mental challenges into the community, they frequently fall through the cracks, especially in a society which is rapidly losing the familial bonds and social cohesion it once enjoyed. As a result, the streets of major cities in California are littered with tents, encampments, and zombie-resembling drug addicts, as people unable to cope without help end up homeless. All of these stories poignantly illustrate the power that a narrative of good intentions holds over the human psyche. The ultimate example of a failed narrative based on this approach is, of course, communism. As Thomas Sowell once wrote in Is Reality Optional?, Much of the social history of the Western world over the last 3 decades has been a history of replacing what worked with what sounded good. The more we continue to do this, the bigger our failures will be. If you enjoy these videos, you should know that they're available on my Substack weeks, sometimes months ahead of time. Click the link in the description, head on over there now, and subscribe. As you know, I've been concerned about both the economic and political direction of travel of Western countries in recent years. That being the case, I'm keen to protect my family in case things continue to get worse. That's why I'm making sure to keep a portion of my savings in gold. The reason the price of everything continues to go up is that governments keep printing money. When they do, inflation is inevitable. What does inflation mean? It's just a fancy word for the value of your money being diluted over time. This is what's happened to the value of the dollar in our lifetimes. Gold is a great way to preserve the fruits of your hard work, while the value of your dollars, pounds, and euros is continually being eroded. My gold dealer, the Pure Gold Company, works across the world providing excellent service and competitive prices. I recently bought some of these Victoria sovereigns. The good thing about these coins is that unlike many investments, they're exempt from capital gains tax. The Pure Gold Company keep my coins in a vault for me, but they can also deliver them to your home. Go to thepuregoldcompany.co.uk/Konstantin-Kisin to protect your wealth today.